The Middle East is burning, and one man has vanished from the center of the fire. For 18 days, missiles have crossed the skies between Iran and Israel. Oil routes tremble. Armies mobilize. The world watches, holding its breath. But the greatest mystery of this war is not a missile strike or a battlefield. It is the silence of one man. The Prime Minister of Israel has disappeared from public view. No confirmed appearances, no live speeches, no verified footage, only rumors. Rumors that an Iranian missile struck the bunker where he was hiding. Rumors that the most powerful man in Israel may already be dead. Officials deny it. Fact-checkers call it misinformation. Yet independent confirmation never arrives. And with every hour of silence, the mystery grows. Who is Benjamin Netanyahu really? A soldier, a strategist, a political survivor, or the architect of a conflict that now threatens to engulf the entire Middle East? To understand the mystery, we must go back. Back before the wars, before the power, before the world knew the name Netanyahu. Because this story does not begin in modern Israel. It begins with ideology. A father who believed survival required strength, and sons raised to believe the world was always dangerous. One of those sons would become Israel's longest-serving leader. Another would die in one of the most famous hostage rescues in history. And that moment would change everything. Because tragedy has a way of forging ambition, and ambition can shape nations. For decades, Netanyahu mastered one political weapon: fear. Fear of enemies, fear of war, fear of survival itself. And now, the man who built his power on fear has become the center of the greatest uncertainty of all. Is he alive? Or has the most powerful figure in Israel vanished into the shadows of war? Before he became the most powerful leader in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu was simply the son of a historian, a man who believed that history was not just something to study, but something to survive. Benjamin Netanyahu had lived through the storms of 20th century Europe. For him, history delivered one lesson above all others: trust no one, rely only on strength. This belief would shape the worldview of his sons. Three boys raised on a single idea: that survival would always depend on power. Benjamin Netanyahu was born in Tel Aviv in 1949, but his childhood would be divided between two worlds: Israel and the United States. At 14, his family moved to America. His classmates called him simply Ben, quiet, focused, serious. But beneath the quiet surface, ambition was already growing. In 1967, the Middle East erupted again, and the teenage student returned to Israel. He joined one of the most secretive units in the Israeli military, the elite special forces known as Sayeret Matkal. This was the unit responsible for Israel's most dangerous missions: deep reconnaissance, counter-terror operations, and missions that could never officially exist. For Benjamin Netanyahu, this was more than military service. For Benjamin Netanyahu, this was more than military service. But another man in that unit would shape his destiny even more: his older brother, Yonatan, a commander admired throughout the Israeli army. Bold, fearless, respected. And in 1976, he would lead a mission that captured the world's attention: a hijacked Air France aircraft. More than 100 hostages held at gunpoint. Israel launched a rescue operation unlike anything attempted before. The mission would later be known as Operation Entebbe. The rescue succeeded. Most hostages survived, but the commander of the operation did not. Yonatan Netanyahu was killed during the raid. He became a national hero, and for his younger brother, everything changed. The death of Yonatan Netanyahu did more than shock a nation. It transformed his younger brother. For Benjamin Netanyahu, grief became purpose. He would dedicate the rest of his life to fighting the enemies he believed had taken his brother away. But first, he returned to the United States. There, he entered one of the world's most prestigious universities, At MIT, Netanyahu studied architecture, management, and economics. At MIT, Netanyahu studied architecture, management, and economics. The global war against terrorism. He began speaking publicly about the threat of international terrorism. These speeches gained attention, and they introduced Netanyahu to the global political stage. Soon, he entered diplomacy. In 1984, Netanyahu became Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. There, he discovered something important. Word could be weapons, and the global stage could be used to shape fear and influence power. When Netanyahu returned to Israel, politics awaited him. The country was divided. Peace negotiations with Palestinians had begun, but many Israelis feared the price of peace. Netanyahu understood that fear, and he learned how to use it. His message was simple: Israel is surrounded by enemies. Only strength can guarantee survival, and only strong leadership can provide that strength. In 1996, that message carried him to victory. At just 46 years old, Benjamin Netanyahu became the youngest prime minister in Israeli history. But power in Israeli politics is rarely permanent. In 1999, Netanyahu lost the election. Many believe his political career was finished. But Benjamin Netanyahu was not finished, because he had already mastered the formula of modern politics. Create a threat, amplify the danger, and present yourself as the only solution. Over the next 2 decades, he would return to power again, and again, and again. By 2023, Benjamin Netanyahu was the most powerful and the most controversial leader in Israel's modern history. But inside Israel, the country was beginning to fracture. Netanyahu had launched a controversial plan to change the country's judicial system. Supporters called it reform. Opponents called it the death of Israeli democracy. Week after week, the streets filled with protesters. Hundreds of thousands marched. Israel had not seen internal division like this in decades. And then, everything changed. October 7th, 2023. Before sunrise, militants from Hamas crossed into Israel. It was the deadliest attack in Israeli history. Gunmen stormed communities. Hundreds were killed. More than 200 people were taken hostage. Israel was in shock. Within hours, Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation. "We are at war," and Israel responded with overwhelming force. The war in Gaza Strip had begun. Missiles rained down across the enclave. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. The humanitarian crisis escalated rapidly. But the war did not stay contained. Tensions rose with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Rocket fire crossed the northern border. Militias in Iraq and Syria entered the conflict, and the shadow of Iran loomed behind it all. The region stood on the edge of a wider war. Inside Israel, pressure on Netanyahu intensified. Families of hostages demanded answers. Protests returned to the streets, this time directed at the government. Critics blamed Netanyahu for the security failure. Supporters insisted Israel must unite during war. But behind the scenes, something unusual began to happen. Public appearances by Netanyahu became rare. Press briefings grew shorter, and rumors quietly began circulating online. Rumors that the prime minister had moved deep into a fortified underground bunker. War changes leaders, but sometimes it hides them. As the conflict intensified, Benjamin Netanyahu disappeared from the public eye for longer stretches. Official statements continued, but the prime minister himself appeared less frequently. Behind closed doors, the war strategy was being shaped. Israel expanded operations in the Gaza Strip. Skirmishes intensified along the northern border with Lebanon. Meanwhile, attention turned to a larger geopolitical shadow. For decades, Netanyahu had warned about Iran's influence across the region. Now, those warnings dominated the narrative. Missile exchanges and proxy clashes threatened to widen the war. Behind Israel's military decisions was a command network built for exactly this moment. Deep beneath the surface, secure facilities were designed to operate during existential war. Facilities capable of surviving missile strikes. Facilities capable of controlling war from the shadows. According to multiple reports, Netanyahu had relocated to one of these underground command centers. Officially, this was normal wartime protocol, but speculation grew online. Some claimed the bunker was located beneath Jerusalem. Others believed it was hidden in military facilities deeper inside Israel. Then, rumors of an attempted strike began circulating. Anonymous sources claimed a high-value Israeli command center had been targeted. No official confirmation followed. International intelligence agencies remained silent, but speculation spread rapidly across global media. Was the bunker struck? Was Netanyahu inside? Or was the story simply misinformation, amplified by the chaos of war? In the fog of modern conflict, truth can become the first casualty. Governments control information, and war creates silence. What is certain is the extraordinary arc of Netanyahu's life. A soldier shaped by loss, a diplomat who mastered global messaging, a politician who dominated Israeli politics for decades, and a leader who guided Israel through some of its most turbulent years. To supporters, he was the guardian of Israel's security. To critics, he was the architect of endless conflict. But history rarely offers simple verdicts. It leaves questions. Questions about power, questions about war, and questions about the leaders who shape history. Because sometimes the final chapter of a story is written long after the cameras stop rolling, and the truth may still be hidden somewhere beneath the surface.